Boredom is a rather easy emotion to achieve. You can be bored doing any number of things. Waiting at the DMV, watching my videos, listening to certain music groups. Most certainly, being sedentary and doing nothing active while nothing actively interesting happens around you is the most active way to become actively disinterested in whatever is going on. However, all of those activities do not actually require your active participation. You can just do something else while they occur, like screw around on your phone or, God forbid, go outside. Playing video games, however, are much more active, even if you still have to sit and be inactive, physically, to participate in them. Thus, in order to make sitting entertaining, games must be fun to play. It is but their nature that games are to be fun. The word game is in the genre title, implying that there is a challenge with rules that must be worked with to achieve some sort of end goal. If you play chess digitally, your goal is to point and click at various objects in particular patterns to win. If you play an adventure game, your goal is to point and click various objects in particular patterns in order to win. And if you play a first-person shooter, your goal is to click various objects in particular patterns in order to win. In case you were not clicking up what I am putting down, video games utilize different methods to challenge you. That is what makes them fun. Active participation is an easy way to make things entertaining, mostly. That's why people play them, as they are entertainment, but interactive. This is why I was utterly shocked to figure out that the video-based interactive entertainment title that goes by the name The Order 1886 is the single most boring piece of media, in general, that I have ever had the displeasure to interact with. I normally am not a man to cover single games based purely on how much I hate them. I would much rather bring to attention something that previously did not receive too much attention, or possibly received too much unneeded negative attention. When I set out to play The Order 1886, it was in preparation of making a video about games with good vibes, but bad gameplay. Something that looks good and has good ideas, but did not do so good in implementing them, much to the chagrin of its developers and cult fans alike. I will still make that video at some point, minus this game, simply because the other games I played gave me joy in instances. I saw what the developers were trying to perform, but failed to coalesce into a finished product. Lack of monies or lack of time, the other games I played showed signs of it. Yet, The Order 1886 is unlike those games, as it is quite possibly the best example of a game, piece of media, that seemingly had complete confidence in itself, confidence in its execution, confidence in its own success, yet still ended up being incredibly, stupendously, non-exaggeratingly boring. So much so, I had to make a video just about how mad this game made me. It really pissed me off. Also, I'll be spoiling the entire game. No, I won't be skirting around it. Let us first begin with the premise. This is the best part of the game, yet also led to it being the worst. Set in an alternate steampunk history, you play as Sir Galahad, a member of the Knights of the Round Table. In this alternate history, this group has the sworn duty to fend off an ancient race of mutant humans who happen to be able to transform into werewolves. This is a badass idea, bending what we know of historical figures, groups, and time periods to allow them to participate in groovy what-if scenarios. The initial trailer of this game really got the creative juices in my mind flowing when I first saw it. Righteous knights strapped with epic-looking tech weapons battling werewolves in the streets of a Victorian-era London. If only any of that actually happens in the game, because it doesn't. Not 20 minutes after installing this game with the idea I would be playing a much more modernized Darkwatch, but in the more terrifying country known as Britain, the first enemies you fight are not werewolves, they are a bunch of white dudes with fucking guns. This game, which has epic, history-twisting lore of you playing as a sacred order of holy knights sworn to defend humanity against werewolves and other gothic horrors with advanced weaponry. You fucking fight people with an automatic rifle. Gee, where have I seen this before? That's a blue ball if I have ever seen one, especially because it takes almost 40 minutes to see a werewolf, and then you fight it and realize, wow, this is really bad. The stupid dog just charges at you, and you hit a button prompt to dodge, rinse and repeat until it's dead. I was stunned to see this. I actually never owned a PS4, and still don't, so I did not pay attention to this game when it was coming out. I was instead just huffing the Xbot copium Phil Spencer kept dishing out every E3. I knew this game was poorly reviewed, but in my mind, I thought it was just going to be like a hyper-real version of the last 30 minutes of Uncharted where you fight the goobers in the Nazi bunker. Not saying that was a particularly great moment, but it was certainly notable, and the Order 1886 had a setting to better match it. I thought, I'll give it a go and show everyone it's not that bad. Yet I was wrong. This is bad, but not even bad in a typically bad way. Normally what constitutes a bad game is that it's visually ugly, maybe littered with bugs, quite possibly poorly balanced. The oddest aspect to the Order 1886 is that it is none of those things. From a mechanical standpoint, this game is actually completely solid. There are no game-breaking bugs or glitches. Gameplay is fundamentally boring, but nonetheless solid, and of course, this game is very, very pretty. Yes, that's it. That's the game. It's pretty boring. The entire gameplay loop, for almost the entirety of its runtime, is you participating in cover-based shooting, but with a 19th century aesthetic. There is nothing that this game does mechanically that you have not seen done in, a better game that exists. Despite the alternate history trappings, there is very, very little alternate history weaponry. The entire arsenal is just automatic rifles, semi-automatic shotguns, machine pistols, the normal stuff. There are 3 trace guns that are actually somewhat alternating history, and that being a rifle with an underbarrel air stun launcher, a rather fictionally but ordinary electric railgun, and by far the single most interesting gameplay mechanic this entire game has, the thermite rifle, which is a machine gun that fires low damage, thermite pellets that are then designed to be lit ablaze with a launched flare, thus lighting up wherever the pellets hit. This is cool, and it is the only thing in this entire game that actually made me go, oh well, that would have been cool if more games had a weapon like this. And then I realized that Call of Duty Advanced Warfare already did. I will continue to harp on the fighting of dudes quite often later on in this video, mostly as a complaint, primarily because this game maybe has 4 or 5 instances of you fighting werewolves, 30 minutes at most. And the arena is almost identical every time. It's an enclosed, boxy space where the werewolf can run off behind and attack you from a different angle. The overwhelming amount of gameplay in this game is just shooting people. Shooting people that just shoot you with guns and then hide behind cover. I've played games like this before and enjoyed it, but that is primarily because those games construct their plot around the fighting of dudes or creatures with guns, so I know what to expect. I expected from the marketing materials I would be fighting werewolves, and instead I am fighting dudes in Great Britain with guns. And even then, if I do the unthinkable and lower my expectations for something that previously set my expectations high, just going and knowing that I will not be fighting lichens or werewolves or whatever, this game is still boring. Because the gameplay is boring, and the story is even more boring because nothing happens in this game. All the characters in this game are competently acted, plot elements are clearly communicated to the player, and the cinematography is rather splendid. But absolutely nothing interesting happens. An inordinate amount of time is just spent talking about either bullshit or events considerably more interesting than what is currently going on. There is considerably more discussion about werewolves, or half-breeds as they are called, than there is actual visible sighting of the said creatures. The best way I can describe this plot is a 19th century version of a modern military plotline, trying to determine how or why if anti-government rebels are gaining access to WMDs and thus you are trying to stop them. There is considerable discussion of the werewolves as though they are weapons of mass destruction, a terrible evil, and just seeing them is equivalent to a military parade showing off ballistic missiles. WMDs to Iraq are what werewolves are to the Order 1886. They ain't there, just lots of talking about them, and where they might be, where they are coming from. At every instant, this game teases me with something considerably more interesting than what is occurring. Vampires being shipped to the United States, werewolves running amok in a poor district of the city, Jack the Ripper killing innocents as actually a vampire? There is no time for that. This game is 5 hours, and the only notable set-piece thing to occur is that a giant Zeppelin crashes and destroys a building that gets destroyed in real life, if by more mundane means. Even if this game had the same amount of combat, it did, but there was a more deeper look into the lifestyle and history of the half-breeds, I may have been more slightly forgiving, because then it might have been maybe a prettier-looking wolf among us. But it's not. You rarely see the creatures. I know I keep harping on the lack of these werewolves, but that is the thing that was promised. Fighting werewolves. That is what this trailer showed. That is what all these characters are trained to do in the lore, is fight werewolves. You rarely see them. This entire building, this organization, is dedicated to fighting them, and never, at any point in this game, is there any fight outside of 1v1s in a dark room with a gun. The Order 1886 is almost the equivalent to creating a game in the Fallout universe, but all you are is Deputy Steele sitting outside Megaton. You get to see very exciting things happen around you, but you cannot participate. Only listen from afar as you stand and repeat dialogue over and over again to people who have previously done something very cool. Yet alas, what we are instead left with is a game with a boring plot with interesting characters who do boring nonsense while talking about considerably more interesting things. And the actual ending that we got is even more insulting than the cliffhanger itself leaves. This entire game is a political thriller, but with werewolves instead of nukes. I've already told you that. Yet, at the very end of this game, when the fucking absentee villain does his monologue, he gives the most rote bullshit speech I have ever heard. Basically just saying, humans are the real monsters. Seriously? What the fuck? Not a single point in this game that theme ever gets brought up aside for the ending. So you bring it up here to make a point? This is one of the very few times I've actually wanted to throw the proverbial tomato at the entertainer. I was that pissed off. This non-philosophical game, where all you do is just blast dudes with firearms, tries to be all magnanimous right at the end. I am not stupid, but this stupid monologue treats me as such. Fuck that. This game is a nothing game. It looks pretty, but its gameplay and storytelling is anything but. People complain the game is short, and you know what? I don't knock that against it. I'm fine with short games. Resident Evil games generally take 5 hours to play once you know what you're doing. But guess what? Resident Evil games have plenty to replay for and plenty of things to miss on your first playthrough. Even a Call of Duty campaign, which has an even shorter story than this, is worthy of replay just due to their spectacle alone. What's more, even Call of Duty has gameplay diversity in set pieces, level design, and objectives. The order is just kill the dudes in the room with chest-high walls or perform the worst stealth I have ever seen in a video game. There is no reason to play this game again, should you be unfortunate enough to even decide to play it to begin with. Because not only will you realize the gameplay has no flavor, you'll realize how much potential spice was otherwise wasted. At an early point in the game, you need to access this hospital, overrun with werewolves. The only way to get in is through an underground tunnel. This is actually a genuinely spooky place. Blood and bodies everywhere. It's dark, cramped, all the trappings for a survival horror moment. The only issue is that the only thing you fight down here is a fucking dude with a gun. And then you get into the hospital. More survival horror atmosphere. Blood, bodies, dark. In a hospital? Hell yeah, that's crazy scary. A spooky vibe. And then the first enemy you fight in this place is a dude with a fucking gun. I audibly groaned seeing this. Such a great horror setup, and all you do is fight a fuckhead with a gun. And then when you do fight a werewolf, it's so lame. Holy shit, these devs spent so much time creating these genuinely frightening areas, and all you do is fight guys with guns. When you are playing as a member of an organization dedicated to fighting gothic monsters, I don't know how to properly construct you how fucking lousy that feels, considering the setup of lore beforehand. I have once heard an argument that this amount of human-on-human combat is okay because the rebels are colluding with the werewolves or whatever, so the knights need to fight the rebels to find the creatures. That is a horrible excuse. This is a new IP. The developers made this world, and yet, for some reason, they have made the most boring window to look at this world in. They made their own art boring. They decided to make the plot events be boring by having the rebels be so involved against the knights. They did not have to do that. They could have made a plot where werewolves are the primary issue, and maybe a working class uprising happens in the background. However, Ready at Dawn has done the opposite. They have made a game where you crush a working class rebellion and werewolves fight, not even you, in the background. Why did they do that? Nothing happens in the Order 1886. It is a waste. And the worst part, through all of this, as I may iterate, is that this game is well made. There are no bugs, no glitches, the game runs great, the cutscenes are well edited, and the game is pretty. The devs actively decided to make a game like this. They very clearly had their goal in mind and executed it exactly as they intended. The only nagging issue with this is that their vision was without flavor. The lead creator said that they were creating this game almost with the idea in mind that they would be able to make their sequel. Well, guess what, bucko? You done fucked up. First impressions are everything, and all you've done is impress me with how somehow you made a game about fighting vampires and werewolves boring. The greatest motoring show ever aired, Top Gear, once made a special where they covered the worst cars of all time. The opinion they came to is that for something to truly be the worst of all time, it had to have been made by people who should have known better, and terrible, but not cheap. No one expects a car made in the former Eastern Bloc to be good, so why knock it for being horrible when it had no intention of being a leader? They named the Lexus SC430 as the worst car of all time, as it's made by Toyota, someone who makes good cars, yet this car was a dreary, miserable luxury coupe that lacks any luxury in either form or functional manner. Very deserving of a car to be called the worst if it has those properties and made by Toyota. Applying this idea to games, no one expects Big Rigs, Ride to Hell, or King Kong to be good. These were made on a budget by people who really didn't know what the hell was going on. I've played many games with lukewarm critical reception, and many times when you play these titles, you see what the developers were trying to do. But maybe they ran out of time, money, or skill. I can see clear as day what the Order 1886 was trying to do, and they actually succeeded in doing it. But it's not attractive at all. This game was meant to be good. It is made well, and Ready at Dawn had years of experience making games beforehand, and the games they made were actually fun. Yet, there is nothing inspiring or exciting here. There is no experimentation in anything but graphical vanity. I cannot in any sane mind recommend this game for someone to play. It is unremarkable as a game, for there are many better games that do the whole third-person shooting thing better. There are also games that do the Werewolves of London thing a little better. Nothing this game did, aside from its idea, its potential, was interesting. But potential is only worth something if you cashed it in, and it's clear to me that they were waiting for their sequel that never happened to cash it in. It looks beautiful, but honestly, who cares when the game has absolutely nothing for plot or gameplay-wise to back it up? And there are so many other good-looking games that do have the gameplay and plot to match. Even if this game was a movie, like it very clearly wanted to be, it would be a boring movie as well. The Order 1886 is one of the worst video games ever made. It is boring, yet developed by people who previously made fun things, and yet at the same time is very clearly made with skillful hands and was not shat out on a budget of shoestrings and gum. I do not recommend you play this, as the gameplay is uninspired and trite. I do not recommend you watch the cutscenes online, as the plot is boring and the characters, while interesting, do not perform anything interesting. I do not even recommend you think about this game, as the setting is so grossly underutilized to the point it is sickening. It is an excellent cut of steak cooked with no spices, when the chef previously was making the greatest fried chicken beforehand. And that one mistake is forever more disappointing than the hundreds of times the Burger King employees fuck up your burger.